It is unimaginable that only 100 years ago, life was strikingly different for many women around the world. We didn't have the right to vote. We faced obstacles to education and work. We could only dream of one day becoming a doctor, a scientist, a lawyer, or a politician. It took a group of brave and bold suffragettes to radically change the course of history for every female that followed. Led by the energetic Emmeline Pankhurst in the UK and other women like her around the world, the suffragette movement is the reason why in 21st century young women almost everywhere can dream big, aim high and achieve their ambitions.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Tonight I will have the great honor of interviewing a brave woman, Lady Constance Lytton. So, let's take a step back in time. We are in London many years ago. Lady Constance Lytton was an influential British suffragette activist, writer, speaker, campaigner for prison reform, votes for women, and birth control. She sometimes used the name Jane Watson. Well, Lady Constance Lytton, can you start telling us your story?
I remember there was a crowd of marching women in a London street chanting, "Deeds not words! Deeds not words!" That was our cry. That day, in 1909, we suffragettes were marching to Parliament to demand a vote for women. We'd come from our meeting in a nearby hall, and the words we'd heard from our movement's leader, Mrs. Pankhurst, were still ringing in my ears.
We shall be marching to Parliament, not as lawbreakers, but because women should be lawmakers.
Some people thought it was strange that I, from a family of the ruling class, should ever have been a part of such a crowd. But Mrs. Pankhurst was a well-born lady too, and listened to what she said next.
A society that allows women no part in decision-making cannot flourish. Beyond the home, what lives are we permitted? Important posts are barred to us in all professions. Posts in government are just for men. Yet all their decisions affect women. They must either do us justice by giving us the vote or do us violence.
When we reached the Houses of Parliament, lines of policemen barred our march. Some women broke through and chained themselves to the railings by the entrance. Meanwhile, I was still outside, wedged by the crowd behind me, nose to nose with a policeman. I was grabbed by the officer. I was marched to the nearest police station, and from there to court, where I was sentenced to a month's imprisonment. And it was there, in Holloway prison, that I truly realized why our cause was so important, why women had to be allowed to vote, to change things.
What happened next?
I have a confession. Because I have a heart condition, I accepted the offer as I was a lady to spend most of my month out of the sink and in the prison hospital. I was ashamed of myself. I decided that as soon as I was released, I'd be marching with the suffragettes again. And if it landed me in prison a second time, I'd make sure I was offered no special treatment. I would suffer whatever the others suffered. For I would go not as a Lady Lytton, but as an ordinary working woman.
Go on with your story, please.
As a Lady Constance Lytton with influential friends, I'd been given special treatment in prison. Would I be treated differently if I changed my appearance and my name? I decided I would join the suffragettes' next march of protest disguised an ordinary working woman, a woman by the name of Jane Watson. Many of my fellow suffragettes who were in prison were now on hunger strike, refusing to take food, and being forced to eat in the cruelest way. So I travelled by train up to Liverpool to join the protests outside prison, where we knew this cruel treatment was in force. Two policemen seemed to have their eyes fixed on me. I was determined to get arrested and imprisoned, so I began to throw the stones I was holding. The two policemen grabbed me by the arms and marched me off to the station. I was sentenced to 14 days hard labor. And thanks to my disguise, Jane Watson, as I know was, received none of the special treatment that had been offered to Lady Lytton. Now I learned exactly what my fellow suffragettes were subjected to. Each day a wardress brought me all my meals, but I didn't want anything. Then, on the fourth day, a doctor entered my cell with 5 wardresses. The medical officer said, "Very well, let's lie her down on her bed." Then he thrust a tube down my throat. I choked as it reached inside. Down and down it went. Then the sloppy liquid food was poured in it, made me sick in a second. It seemed an eternity before they took the tube out. I knew that Lady Constance Lytton would not have been treated like this, but ordinary Jane Wharton was a despised, helpless creature, and when she was out of prison, no one would believe a word she said. There were so many Jane Whartons in our land, we had to help them by winning votes for women. Perhaps in time, women will have the vote on the same terms as men. Perhaps one day they will even be elected themselves. I hope for this at least, that anyone in future times who has the right to vote will use it and will remember the struggle of the suffragettes. Deeds, not words. Deeds, not words.
Deeds, not words. Deeds, not words.
This is a real depiction of the battle these brave women waged, so that other women can pull curtain out the polling booth and have their say.
Today, unfortunately, many women don't go to vote. What would those women think of this? If you think that voting is more of a burden than a privilege, if you think it's too much trouble and you don't have time, if you think that someone else should make your choices for you, maybe you should look these women in the eyes and tell them why.